When I was 16, my father threw me out of the house. No warning, no explanation, just the cold echo of a slammed door and the sound of my mother's muffled cries behind it. I remember standing on the front steps that night, clutching a torn backpack and staring at the mansion I'd called home for 16 years. The lights that once meant safety now looked like judgment. My father's voice still rang in my ears. "You're not my son anymore. Get out." I didn't understand. I was just a boy, angry, confused, and helpless. The man I admired, the man I thought would protect me, had just erased me from his life like a stain on a wall. I slept behind a diner that night. The next morning, hunger forced me inside. I asked the manager if I could have something to eat. He looked at me, wrinkled his nose, and said, "If you want food, grab a mop." That was my first job, cleaning toilets. For the next 8 years, that became my life. Every morning I scrubbed floors that never stayed clean. I polished mirrors in bathrooms where no one looked twice at me. I learned the smell of bleach better than the smell of home. I wore uniforms 2 sizes too big and shoes that squeaked with every step, like a reminder that I didn't belong anywhere. There were nights when I'd sit outside the diner, look up at the stars and ask God why. Why me? Why would a father throw his own son away? But in that silence, something began to grow inside me. Not hatred, not yet, but fire. A quiet fire that whispered, "You'll make it out. You'll prove you're worth something." I started saving every dollar I could. I slept in the storage room behind the diner, hid my money in an old coffee can, and took night classes whenever I could afford them. The people around me laughed. "Kid, you clean toilets for a living." "Dream smaller," they said, but I didn't. I remembered my father's face and that look of disappointment, that arrogance. And every scrub, every stain I wiped clean was one more reason to rise. 8 years passed. I was 24 now, with calloused hands and a spine hardened by survival. One day, while cleaning the restroom, I overheard 2 businessmen talking about an opening in a construction company. I took a risk and asked if they needed a janitor. One laughed, but the other handed me a card. That card changed my life. I started at the bottom again, sweeping floors, carrying bricks, serving coffee. But this time I watched and learned. I studied how deals were made, how contracts worked, how people spoke when they held power. Within 2 years, I wasn't just cleaning. I was calculating. I learned how to bid for small projects. Eventually, I started my own cleaning service, Pure Start Maintenance. It was humble, but it was mine. By 28, I had 5 employees. By 25, my company was cleaning offices across 3 cities. The same hands that once scrubbed toilets were now signing checks. But no matter how successful I became, I couldn't forget that night. The door slamming, my father's face, the rejection. Then one day a letter arrived. A thick formal envelope with a gold seal. Law offices of Wilkins and Tate. My heart stopped. Inside, it read, "You are requested to attend the reading of the late Mr. Jonathan Whitmore's will." My father's name. For a moment I thought it was a cruel joke. I hadn't spoken to him in 12 years. Why would he want me there? Still, curiosity and or maybe pain drove me to go. The law firm was cold, lined with marble and silence. My half-brother Charles sat across the table smirking. He was everything my father wanted. Polished, educated, entitled. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began reading. "To my eldest son, Charles Whitmore, I leave the controlling shares of Whitmore Enterprises." Charles grinned, already imagining his empire. Then the lawyer cleared his throat and continued. "To my younger son, Michael Whitmore." That was me. The room went still. "I leave a personal letter in an envelope. Inside he will find what he deserves. A letter." "That was it?" Charles laughed out loud. "Guess Dad really meant it when he said you were worth nothing." The lawyer handed me the envelope. My hands trembled. Inside there was a small key and a single note. It read, "For 8 years I watched you. I needed to know what kind of man you'd become without my name. without my wealth. Go to the place where you first worked and you'll find the truth. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, gratitude. But I went. The diner was still there, older, worn down just like me. I walked to the back where I used to sleep and found a small metal box buried beneath the ground. The key fit perfectly. Inside there was a USB drive and another letter. If you're reading this, son, it means you passed my test. The world will tell you that money builds men. I wanted to know if you could build yourself. The man who cleans toilets with integrity deserves more than the man who runs companies with arrogance. You are the rightful heir to everything I built. Enclosed is the transfer of my assets. $2.1 billion I froze. The world spun around me. $2.1 billion. For minutes I couldn't breathe. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. Not because of the money, but because all those years I thought he hated me. He was testing me, watching me. When I walked out of that diner, I didn't feel rich. I felt reborn. Charles tried to fight it in court, of course. He accused me of forgery, manipulation, anything he could. But the evidence was solid. The will stood. And just like that, the janitor became the billionaire. But here's what shocked everyone. I didn't fire my brother or take revenge. I offered him a job. Not as an executive, as a manager under me. He refused. Pride wouldn't let him. I could have humiliated him the way he once mocked me. But I didn't. Because I had already learned the most powerful lesson my father could have taught. Revenge is temporary. Dignity is forever. Instead, I built homes for kids who were thrown out like I was. I started scholarships for janitors' children. I visited that same diner once a year and tipped every worker $1,000 in cash. Not because of guilt, but because I understood the value of unseen people. When reporters asked me how it felt to go from cleaning toilets to inheriting billions, I told them the truth. I was rich long before the money came. The struggle made me rich. The humility, the hunger, the pain, those were my investments. Today, when I look back, I don't see tragedy. I see transformation. If you're listening to this right now wondering why life is breaking you, remember this. Sometimes the universe doesn't destroy you. It shapes you. The walls that close around you aren't prisons. They're pressure chambers building your strength. I lost everything at 16. I cleaned toilets for 8 years. But those years gave me something no inheritance ever could, my character. And that, my friends, is what made me ready when life finally handed me everything. So when they laugh at your dreams, let them. When they doubt you, smile. When you're cleaning floors, washing dishes, or working jobs that nobody respects, keep going. Because one day when your name is on the building, you'll realize those were the years that built your soul. My father was right. He didn't leave me with money. He left me with a mission, and I promise you, there's no greater inheritance than that. After the will was read and the world learned who I really was, things changed overnight, at least on the surface. My name was suddenly everywhere. Newspapers called me the billionaire janitor. Talk shows begged for interviews. People who once ignored me suddenly remembered my number. But inside, I was still that 16-year-old boy standing on the porch, wondering why his father shut the door. I used to think money could heal that pain. I was wrong. Money only amplifies what's already inside you. For months I couldn't sleep. Every night I would open that letter, the one my father left him, and read it again. I searched for hidden meaning, for forgiveness between the lines. Sometimes I'd whisper, "Why didn't you just tell me?" I decided I needed answers. Not from the lawyers, not from the papers, but from the people who had been part of my father's secret world. So I started digging. The first clue came from one of his old employees, an elderly accountant named Henry. When I met him in my father's former office, he looked at me with watery eyes and said, "He used to ask about you every month. He'd always say, 'Is Michael doing okay?' But he didn't want you to know. He was afraid his name would make you weak. That broke me. I turned away so Henry wouldn't see me cry." He continued, Your father lost everything once when he was young. He built it all again from nothing. He believes struggle makes men worthy. You were his greatest experiment, and his greatest pain. For the first time I realized my father's cruelty wasn't born from hate. It was his way of forging me. A brutal way, but maybe it worked. Still, part of me felt robbed of years I could never get back. I decided to visit my mother. I hadn't seen her since the night I was thrown out. When she opened the door, she froze. Her hair had grayed, her hands trembled, and tears filled her eyes. "Michael," she whispered, as if afraid to believe it. I nodded. She fell into my arms, sobbing. "I wanted to stop him that night," she cried. "But he told me if I interfered, he'd cut us both off. I thought he'd call you back. I didn't know it would be for years." I held her tighter. "It's okay, Mom. It's over now." But it wasn't over. Behind all the wealth and forgiveness, something darker was brewing. My brother Charles. He couldn't accept what had happened. His pride turned to poison. He launched lawsuits, spread lies to the media, claimed I manipulated the will. But every accusation fell apart because my father had recorded a final video message, one that the lawyers played publicly if the will was challenged. In that video, my father spoke directly to us. "Charles, you were given everything and you learned nothing. Michael was given nothing and he built everything. Life rewards the one who endures, not the one who expects." The world watched. Charles stormed out of court, humiliated. Weeks later, he came to see me. I'll never forget that night. He barged into my office, his face red with anger. "You think you deserve this?" he shouted. "You're a janitor with lucky blood. You'll never be one of us." I looked at him calmly. "One of us? You mean one of the people who believe worth comes from a last name?" "No, Charles. I'm not one of you. I'm something you'll never understand, earned." He clenched his fists, shaking. "You took everything from me." I sighed. "No, Charles. Dad gave us both a test. You failed yours. That's not my fault." He left that night without another word. Months passed. I focused on building something new. Not another corporation, but a foundation. I called it Second Start. It helped kids from broken homes, homeless teens, and janitors who wanted to go back to school. Every dollar I invested felt like healing an old wound. But one day, as I was walking through the foundation's new building, a volunteer ran up to me. "Sir, there's a man outside asking for you. He says it's urgent." I went out, and there stood Charles, but he wasn't the same. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "I lost everything. The company went bankrupt after I tried to run it without Dad's people. I don't even have a home now." For a long time we just stood there. The same man who once mocked me was now broken. He whispered, "How did you do it, Michael? How did you survive when everything was against you?" And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger. I felt compassion. "Because I stopped fighting the pain," I said softly. I started learning from it. I reached into my pocket, took out a key, and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "An apartment. One of mine. Stay there until you get back on your feet." His eyes widened. "After everything I did?" I smiled faintly. "Dad taught me to be strong. Life taught me to be kind." He broke down crying. For the first time we hugged, not as enemies, but as brothers. That night I finally understood what my father's test was really about. It wasn't about money or survival. It was about becoming a man who could rise without hate. Months later, I held a public event for the foundation. Thousands attended. Janitors, waiters, street cleaners, students. All people who had been ignored their whole lives. When I stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded me for a second. But then I saw their faces, and faces full of hope. And I said, "When I was 16, I was kicked out of my home. I slept behind a diner and cleaned toilets to survive. For 8 years I thought my life was over. But I was wrong. Those 8 years were the making of me." The crowd was silent. You could hear hearts beating. "I stand before you not as a billionaire, but as a man who learned that pain is the greatest university in the world. When life breaks you, it's not to destroy you, it's to rebuild you stronger. My father didn't abandon me. He believed in me enough to let me fight my own battles. I took a deep breath, looked up, and smiled. So if you're cleaning floors today, believe me, you're not at the bottom. You're in training. Don't let anyone tell you your work is worthless. Every floor you clean, every tear you hide, every dream you keep alive when the world says give up, that's your foundation. One day you'll stand tall because of it. The crowd erupted into applause. Some people were crying. Some were smiling through tears. After the event, I went home, sat in my father's old study, the same place he had built his empire, and turned on the video he'd left behind again. This time I didn't cry. I just whispered, "You were right, Dad. Thank you." As the screen faded to black, I realized something I'll never forget. Sometimes love doesn't come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it comes disguised as hardship, rejection, and pain. But it's love all the same, because it forces you to grow into the person you were meant to be. Now, whenever I drive past that diner, I stop for coffee. The workers there know who I am, but they don't treat me like royalty. They treat me like one of them. And that's exactly how I want it. I still keep that old mop from my first day, framed on my office wall. It reminds me where I came from and why I'll never look down on anyone. Because in the end, titles fade, money fades, but character, that's forever. And if there's one thing my story proves, it's this. You don't need billions to change your destiny. You just need belief. Belief that the worst thing that ever happened to you might secretly be the best thing that ever could. So, to everyone out there cleaning toilets, washing dishes, hustling for survival, hold your head high. Your worth isn't defined by where you start, but by how far you refuse to stop. I was kicked out at 16. I cleaned toilets for 8 years. And when my father's $2.1 billion will finally found me, it didn't change me. It revealed who I already was.